Hello and welcome once more to Dr. Jimmy's Horror Nights History. Well, I'm sure that there are some of you out there even now who are carefully piecing together bits of information in an attempt to discover such truths as might be legendary. As indeed we have those of us, and I must include myself, who have made some efforts in this regard to piece together puzzles and inadvertently summon ancient Sumerian fear demons, oh dear, to come and devour our souls, or at least, or become a really cool icon for the next event, which we all know is Halloween Horror Nights Dos Equus. Yes, where the icon will be the most interesting man in the world. Fear. Yes. Ancient Sumerian amulets. Anybody want their amulet? Okay. Enough of that silliness. But the point is that in the next few weeks leading up to the event, I have it on pretty good authority that some of the things that you legendary truth CFOs and CROs and whatever you are going to be needing to look at to piece together are how fear has manifested itself before this event throughout the entire history of Horror Nights, going all the way back to Fright Nights in '91, and how each event is somehow causally, cosmically, mystically, purposely or not purposely, we don't know, connected to each other to perform a bizarre pattern of evil and horror and madness and fear leading up to what's happening today. Fear's always been there, like a puppet master, controlling everything for the past 20 years, and we must discover that. Therefore, even though I'd already planned to do a series on Horror Nights history, it occurs to me now this could be purposeful, not just to help inform some people who might be too young to remember these things or have never bothered to look too closely into them, but also, those of you doing legendary truth, maybe some of the things I bring up might point toward some of the information that you're connecting about past events. So to that end, although I completed Fright Nights, let me just add a few things about Fright Nights that connected to future events, because that might be where you want to look. And the original Haunted House Dungeon of Terror didn't end with Fright Nights in 1991. It would return again. In the same regard, there was in New York what was billed as Chainsaw Massacre, and as I stated, it was men with chainsaws chasing the tourists, the guests, chasing them around. So basically your chainsaw drill team, even though it wasn't called that yet, started in '91 and has existed at Halloween Horror Nights in some form or other every single year of the event till today, where it will be again in New York Street, only with a steampunk over. And another tradition that has remained consistent for 20 years is the Rat Lady, who has appeared in one form or another since 1991 at every single Halloween Horror Nights event, whether she's in a house or on the street. Somehow this woman in her casket of rats scurrying and curling all over her little body, with her little ratty feet tickling her. Yes, and sometimes you can actually see them bite her. Boy, I hope they pay her well for that job. Smear peanut butter on certain parts of her body. let's not go there. Anyway, so the naughty rats. Yes, and the rat lady has been a part of Halloween Horror Nights from Fright Nights all the way up. So those are things that connect. Anything else? Well, oddly, yes. Oddly, yes. Because there's another thing that was at Halloween Horror Nights, at Fright Nights in '91, that I didn't remember to mention to you. But there was another show I didn't bother to mention. There was a show in the Animal Actors Studio, or Animal Actors Theatre, located near what is today Kid Zone. And that show was a magic show featuring a pair of magicians called the Pendragons. Sort of a third-rate, what are their names? The Austrian boys, Van Horn and Roy. Yes, Siegfried and Roy. Yes, a third-rate Siegfried and Roy. You know, instead of tigers, they have, I don't know, chinchillas or something. You know, chihuahuas. They had some kind of animal, maybe a bear. I forget what it was, but there was an animal in their act. I remember that. It was part of their magic. But it wasn't a big tiger. And it sort of gave a feeling of a really hokey, cheaper version of Siegfried and Roy, is the way I remember it. And maybe I misremember. Again, there's been an awful lot of magic acts over the years. And that's my point. There's been an awful lot of magic acts over the years, from the first Fright Nights till today. And once again, there'll be a magician performing at the event this year. So the tradition of magic acts sometimes showing up in that particular stage, that particular venue, goes all the way back to 1991, the Pendragons. So these things, to me, seem to be connecting things I can find from Fright Nights. So I just brought it up for the sake of legendary truth. Let us then, at last, proceed with Horror Nights history for '92. Alright, after the event of Fright Nights was over, I'm certain, at some point, shortly afterwards, some people got together behind closed doors to have an assessment to determine how successful the event went off. And I'm pretty darn sure they decided it was really, really successful. Because if it hadn't been, we wouldn't be having the event this year. And I wouldn't be making this video, and you wouldn't be watching it, now would you? No. So, yes, indeed. They said, yeah, we did good. Yeah, we kicked ass. We're gonna do this next year. But how can we make it better? What did we do real well that we can continue? What didn't work so well that maybe we won't do anymore? These were the kind of thoughts and ideas that were flying around. And somewhere along the line, between the end of Fright Nights and the beginning of October 1992, someone decided that Fright Nights was not a good idea, was not a good name for the event anymore. Now, I'm not sure exactly why, but I have a strong suspicion it had something to do with the fact that there are a number of other haunted attractions happening in different parts of the United States and elsewhere that use the name Fright Nights. Yeah, that could be a very good reason, because even though this was Universal Studios Fright Nights, it could confuse the consumer if there are too many other events using the same name. It would be better to come with a more distinctive name that the consumer, the Halloween haunted attraction consumer, would only associate with Universal Studios. Right. And not to mention there were a couple of movies in the 80s that were called Fright Night. But that's another story. There. Now. So, they decided to use a name which had been used before in California in 1986, as I had mentioned in an earlier video. Halloween Horror Nights. And the logo of the chainsaw cutting its way through the pumpkin that had been used in Hollywood was brought to Florida to be used. And so, the second annual Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Florida, as it was called in those days, debuted on 2 weekends and Halloween night. Yes, they had extended to a second weekend. And Halloween was on a Sunday, so actually it was a Friday, Saturday, the following Friday, Saturday, and the Sunday after that was Halloween. But instead of 3 nights, it was 5. 5 nights of horror. Yes, so they increased the amount of horror. However, from a personal standpoint, although I no longer worked in the security department of Disney and had transferred to work at the Comedy Warehouse and on Pleasure Island, I found that I was scheduled to work every single one of those nights. Well, there's this mysterious disease called the Halloween flu. Ooh, and I just got... I can't come into work tonight. I'm sorry. But I wasn't stupid enough to do that on Halloween. No. They would have been very suspicious if it was Halloween night. No, so I picked one of the least likelier nights of the first weekend to go and check it out. And thus attended Halloween Horror Nights DOS. Well, what was that one like? Well, it didn't have everything in the street all at once effect of the first one, but we had now not just 1, but 2 haunted houses going on, which means you didn't have as huge a line as you had the first year, because it was not everyone getting in line to see the one haunted house. So we had 2 haunted houses, and one was a return to the Dungeon of Terror, which was very similar to the first year's, some variations, but still very similar concept. A second haunted house, on the other hand, and it was set in the same location, which was the Jaws queue, because again, it was a 3-year renovation going on to fix that shark, and so it was still not open in October of 1992. And so the Jaws queue was still used for that purpose. But, cat, it's a cat right here. But, the second haunted house was a rather interesting concept. Basically what had happened was earlier that year, actually the year before, 91, there was a Universal film directed by Wes Craven, the renowned horror director who had created Freddy Krueger. It was called The People Under the Stairs, about a very strange family of inbred freaks who, mom and dad were brother and sister, and they had one little girl that they had, I guess, abducted and adopted or whatever, and she was up in the room and held prisoner. But their natural offspring, a bunch of strange boys who are deformed and demented, who were all living under the stairs in the cellar, basically. And their house was located somewhere in the hood, and some gangster types wanted to go in there and steal all their money. And they took a little neighborhood boy with them, whose name happened to be Fool, or as he was pronounced by the people of that community, Foo, took Foo with them over to get into that house. Well, the lad, who should have had a better name than Fool, was because he wasn't that dumb, managed to outwit the evil psychotic people and their vicious snarling Rottweiler dog, and save the girl. And of course the comeuppance came from those people under the stairs. And one of the boys in question was always running around through the woodwork. Okay. This will have to be continued once again.